Cairo, Seattle.
It's time to get schooled with the Professor, John Clayton.
Welcome to Schooled with the Professor, and joining us is Bill Polian, Hall of Fame General Manager, basically to talk about the way the draft has changed, building teams have changed. We're here in Philadelphia watching what was a very unusual first round. And the trends that you see now, it's almost in some ways with the quarterbacks, you have to reach ahead and take a quarterback and have him sit, but it still can be pretty costly.
Oh, it can. You and I talked about this last night after our broadcast of the first round. In 1984, Jim Kelly and Dan Marino, who had blemishes on them compared to some of the problems we run across today, were drafted below 20 because of the so-called blemishes. And they both had stellar collegiate careers. There were rumors of drug use. There was never any proof of it. In Jim's case, it was a separated shoulder, which was healing completely. And so two Hall of Famers get drafted in the 20s. Last night we see three players who are probably not ready to play, one of whom had only 13 starts, the other of whom had more starts but a losing record as a college quarterback, and they're all drafted in the top 12. So it's a new paradigm in this league. I liken it to the NBA draft with the one and dones. In many cases, when it comes to quarterbacks, you're just drafting potential, hoping that you hit on one, because it's so hard to come by one that can win. You're just hoping that you hit on one. And I wouldn't argue with the construct. If you don't have one, you have to roll the dice and get them. I applaud the Chicago Bears for doing what they did.
But do you think now the recognition is there that if you're going to get a quarterback, either you're lucky by hitting the right year where a quarterback's up top, or you have to take one because they're coming out of spread offenses that you almost have to sit them for a year or 2 years and wait?
Well, that's ideal. I mean, that's what should happen. It didn't with Blake Bortles, and you see the results. They didn't, they have not yet picked up his option. They may next week, but the fact of the matter is that he's struggled every single year because he's playing behind a bad offensive line. He's had 4 different offensive coordinators. He's never really learned how to be a professional quarterback, and his mechanics are all over the place. So, you really don't know what you've got if you throw him in there right away. You can break him the way Jim Plunkett was broken physically in New England. It wasn't until year 7 or 8 of his career when he went to the Oakland Raiders that he finally, Los Angeles Raiders, then he finally developed. So if you can sit the guy for a year or a year and a half, that's the way to do it, because they've got to learn how to be professionals. I had Wade Wilson on my radio show a couple weeks ago, and I said, how difficult is it to teach these young quarterbacks? He said, Bill, it's impossible. Let's start with the fact that they don't even use their voice. They don't call a play in the huddle. Most of the time they don't use an audible snap count because it's all on silent count. They don't call audibles at the line of scrimmage. They don't set protections. They may have a chance to change a play, but it's usually on a signal from the bench, or they use a hand signal. So they simply don't get involved in it, and you have to retrain them to do everything, to learn verbiage. There is no verbiage in the spread offense. It's all just pictures and symbols, and so it's really difficult to get a guy ready to play. Deshaun Watson is probably the most ready to play because he's played 2 years at Clemson and played at the absolute highest level. But he still has an adjustment to make, as smart as he is. I've been talking to Dabo Sweeney yesterday. He reconfirmed how smart he is and how studious he is. He still will have a problem.
How much more difficult is it this year and future years to building a franchise? Because nobody has been able to build more than you. You've been able to build 3 franchises into successful franchises. How much more difficult is it now than when you did it, or was it more difficult then?
Well, I think it's difficult in every era. The Bills were built during the non-free agency era, and were ultimately deconstructed through free agency. The Panthers were built at the dawn of free agency, where we had the opportunity to sign a lot of veteran free agents in the early going, but they were at the end of their careers, and when it was time to turn it over, we didn't do that very, very well. And then the Colts were built completely during the free agency and salary cap era. So it's 3 different challenges. I believe in today's game that you can build a team that will go with a really good coach now and a really good coaching staff. You can build a team that will go 9-7, or as you have pointed out to me many times correctly, if the schedule kind of breaks in your favor, you might be able to go 10-6 and maybe even 11-5. But if you don't have a quarterback, you're probably going out in the first round of the playoffs. You can build that team, I would say, probably within 3 years if you're really astute and you know what you're doing, and you have good scouts and everybody in the organization's on the same page and all the things that you need to do to have a successful organization. But you're never going to get beyond that without the elite quarterback, or the quarterback at least who can win for you when everything else goes wrong. And what fans don't recognize when they see teams reaching for these quarterbacks and doing everything they can to try to get one is that the special quarterback breathes life into the rest of your team. The year that Peyton was gone for us in Indianapolis, our last year there and his last year there, I walked out of the hotel. We're going to go play the Cincinnati Bengals. It was in the early third of the season. We still were pretty healthy. We were playing pretty well. Defensively, we were fine. And one of the assistant coaches said to me, you know, for 13 years we've gotten on this bus on the way to the game and said, we got a 50% chance of winning. 50-50 every time we get on the bus. So that's not the case anymore. And he pointed to the players' bus and said, they know it. And what happens is you begin to press because the big guy isn't there. And the pressure becomes greater on you. And the more you do, the more you try to do, the less well you do it. And when you make a mistake, as teams invariably do, nobody plays the perfect game. And the perfect example of that is last year's Super Bowl. The Patriots were awful for 3 quarters. And Atlanta was tremendous for 3 quarters. Something always goes wrong. Well, when something goes wrong and you don't have that guy in the center who can bail you out, now things continue to go wrong and go downhill. That's what he does for you. He has a psychic effect as well as a physical and mental effect. So you just have to try and do everything you can to find that guy. If you get very lucky, as we did in Indianapolis, and he comes out in the draft the year you're looking for one, well, they got lucky twice, actually. Andrew Luck, they got Andrew Luck the next time around. Then you're golden as long as you make the right choice. Otherwise, you got to keep trying. But you can, and I emphasize this, with a good organization and really good scouting and really good coaching, you can build a 9-7 or 10-6 team with an average quarterback. You can't win with a guy. You can't go 9-7 or 10-6 with a guy who turns it over. But with a quarterback who takes care of the ball and is a good game manager, and I'm selling short Kansas City's quarterback by saying this, but someone of that ilk, you can do fine, but you're probably never going to get to the ultimate game.
Where do you assess what's happened in Seattle, the team that they've built, their ability to bounce back and see if they can make another run at that? Where would you assess they are?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's a great organization. They know where they are. They've got the quarterback. and they got him signed for a long period of time. And he's now impacting the salary cap, so they've had to rejigger around him. But they do have a system defensively that they know how to fit players into. They have a offensive philosophy where they're going to run the ball and they're going to throw play action passes and they're going to take a shot every now and then. And they've built in some stuff that plays to Russell's strength, but he's also developed to where he's now a really good pocket quarterback. And he's just a play extender now instead of a run-around guy. And so they're really very competitive. But the best part of their team, the secondary, is aging and having injuries. So they need to replace those guys because that group did a phenomenal job in turning the ball over and limiting other teams' offenses. So they're a team that is constructed from back to front on defense. And they've done a great job of retooling on the front. The back end is harder to find because those guys are pretty special.
Yeah, I know that their core group, most of them on defense, now between the ages of 28 and 31. Where's that number that you start to worry?
28 is the magic number. Professional athletes begin to decline at that point. They reach their peak and begin to decline in virtually every sport. The elite guys, let's take receivers out of the mix for the moment and quarterbacks. Everybody else, 32 is about the number. You know, once you get past 32, now the injuries begin to mount, the time missed begins to mount. It's harder for them to come back. It's harder for them mentally to overcome injury because if you just look at it this way, these guys are all elite athletes, and the guys we're talking about are the elite of the elite. They've never been hurt, or if they've been hurt, they've just been nicked. So when they get a serious injury at age 30 or 31, that's hard to come back for. Psychologically, they're not really prepared to do it. So, or it takes a lot of adjustment to do it. So at 32, you start to say to yourself, this is probably as good as we're going to get out of this player. I drew an imaginary line in my mind that when a player hit 30, it's time to start looking for his successor and bringing his successor on board, because the football gods don't smile on you very often after age 30.
How difficult is that, knowing that now you're successful, you're drafting at the bottom of the rounds, and now you have to hit on so much more when it's tougher in the low 20s to be able to do that?
Well, as usual, you look to the Patriots for an example. What they've done this year, a couple things have happened. Again, we're talking about the paradigm that's brand new. Players are coming into the league earlier. That's a yogiism. Players are coming into the league younger than they used to, because they're encouraged by the agents to leave. The siren song of start your clock toward free agency earlier the players believe that. And so even though they're drafted in the 3rd or 4th or 5th round, if they make a club, by the time they hit restricted free agency, they're 23 or 24, as opposed to 25 or 26 in the old days. And so if you go into restricted free agency and use draft choices, which are low draft choices, as you just pointed out, as currency to sign restricted free agents, now you're getting a guy who's been through his learning curve. You've seen him, you know exactly what kind of a player he is, and you probably know what kind of person he is. And now you're able to plug him in right away into your system without any learning curve whatsoever, just nomenclature, that's all. And so that's what they did with Cooks. They've done that with a lot of other guys. They've done it through trades for guys who are about to become restricted free agents, Kyle Van Noy. They're building their team not with draft choices, where they haven't really been terribly successful over the years, but with young veterans. And they let their expiring guys, especially those that don't really fit the program, their original draft choices like Jones, for example, go and they save that money and they use it for restricted free agents, or as it was the case with the cornerback from Buffalo in free agency, a premier free agent that they paid a lot of money to, because he's still young and he can play, and he's at a position. They played against him twice a year for 4 years. They know what he is. They made the move on Hogan last year, who was immense help to them. They made the move on the running back from Buffalo this year, who's going to replace the big power back. So they're showing us a different way of doing things, and as usual, they're at the cutting edge of it. And that's Bill Belichick, no one else. It's Bill doing it with the help of Ernie Adams, who's his football research and development guy. So that's an interesting way to do it. I'm watching that closely. I already saw them retool their defense in the middle of the season last year by making trades, and that to me was amazing. I'd never seen that done before, but it's possible. And now they're doing it. They get Cooks as a restricted free agent. They get, as I said, they got Hogan last year. They completely redid their receiving corps through restricted free agents. So good for them.
Since 2011, I think they've made 25 player trades that usually are guys either in the third or fourth year of their rookie contracts, where they can look at them, determine if they want to go ahead and re-sign them or let them go for compensatory picks or other values.
Yeah. I think the compensatory pick thing is overrated myself. The compensatory picks are treated as thirds. People call them thirds. They're really not thirds. There are only 32 picks in each round. They're high fourths, which is okay. I mean, that's fine. But I don't lose sleep over compensatory picks. What I do see is by them is the creative use of draft choices in order to bring in veteran players, guys who know the ropes. And if you think about it, Bill's on the back end of his coaching career. Tom is certainly on the back end of his playing career. Why do you want to waste time with veterans? Especially veterans who don't know how to play. It took Jimmy Garoppolo 2 years to learn how to play. He'll probably leave as a free agent next year. So, why do you get into that? That they do it the other way. They bring in guys who have time in the league and then still haven't hit that magic mark of 28, 29, 30. They're going to, for example, they'll get the full value of Cook's contract. If you sign a regular free agent after 4 years, you're going to eat at least 1 year of his contract actuarially. I mean, you know that. You tell the owner, look, we're paying this guy for 5 years. We're only getting 4 at best. So they figured it out, and it's really interesting. If I were back building a team, I'd take a hard look at that. Pro personnel and pro personnel acquisition in this day and age has taken on much more importance than it used to. Much more.
Hey, Bill, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, John, always.
That's it for this week's edition of Schooled. Thanks for listening. Class dismissed.